Hi, everybody. I'm Melissa Arrighi, the town manager in Plymouth. Welcome to Truth Be Told. I've been on a 2-week vacation, so it's good to be back and to see all of you again. And I'm really happy to have David Gould with us. Now, we're going to go to him in a minute. I think he's pretty recognizable now by most of the Plymouth residents because he has done so many projects in this community. And this morning, we're lucky enough to be able to run through, let's say, about 7 of those projects if we have enough time. So welcome, David. I'm really glad you're with me. I'm going to make you jump right in as we're going to be showing pictures throughout the show. And tell me one of the projects that you are the most proud of.
Oh boy, I don't know if I could just pick one. I have so many unique memories of each project that we've ever worked on. Certain aspects of projects stand out. Brewster Gardens being one of the first major projects that I ever worked on where I learned so much, and Eel River being a project which was fantastic. And I have a lot of memories of that one simply because the approach we took was something everyone said wasn't going to work. So yeah, town book stuff is obviously dredging because we never thought we'd actually get it done. A lot of people didn't think we'd actually get there, and we did. So
I had some doubts, David, and I never really doubt you, but on the dredging, I just kept thinking, is this really going to happen? But I want to start with Brewster Gardens because I first came to work in Plymouth in 2004. And God, did you start the year before that?
I started a couple of years before that, right?
Yeah. And Brewster Gardens was one of the first huge projects you did. And you worked a little bit with George Crombie and Ted Bubbins on that one?
Yeah, George, actually, when I started, Lee Pack assigned me to that project. I made the mistake. He asked me if I had ever done any environmental permitting, which we were having some issues with. And I made the mistake of answering yes, and then got into helping out on that project. And then when George came on, he asked me to be the manager on that project. I had managed the only other previous project I'd ever really worked on was the first dam removal we had ever done. Which was a great project, but it was just obviously not as high profile as Brewster Gardens, a little bit more in the woods on Billington Street as opposed to Brewster Gardens, which was, so incredibly visible. And so, yeah, learned an awful lot about, managing, because that project was both done by staff and contractors, learning how to manage and schedule both and do permitting and design work on it. And George was helpful, but at the same time, pretty challenging guy, pretty high expectations, especially for a first high profile project. So learned a lot. And then, then I think after that, everyone, like Mark Sylvia became town manager and associated me with doing parks. And then I did Nelson, and it sort of kept going, even though parks wasn't really, something I was doing, but yeah.
I know that you and I have worked together for so long, but when I want to restore a park, I look to you too. I mean, you take so much pride in your work, and Brewster Gardens is just so lovely. I mean, so aren't so many of the other projects, and we have a picture of Brewster that we're showing right now, but the Eel River, talk about completely different projects. Tell the community at large about where they can see this and what that project consisted of.
Yeah, Eel River is definitely one of those projects where it's more about seeing what it could be as opposed to what it is. So when the town and CPC acquired the property, there were cranberry bogs. But what was unique about it was the headwaters of the Eel River. So the very beginning of the Eel River watershed came out of these bogs. And it was about looking at it and seeing what you could do to restore it. So there's about 40 acres of cranberry bogs. The river had been diked and channelized, water control structures in it, 2 culverts downstream and a dam downstream. And so it was about looking at how can you restore that. And I think the approach that we wanted to take was, can we look at this project holistically and do a project that encompasses all those things that I just mentioned? Wetland restoration, dam removal, culvert replacements, doing all of that. Because typically that would be, 5 or 6 multiple projects. Could we do it as one? And so I had a colleague, Brian Graber, who worked for American Rivers. And he was the first person I reached out to, and he and I walked it. And I sort of told him what I wanted to do out here in terms of the scope. And I probably asked Brian because I knew he wouldn't be like, no, that's not the way to go. You should probably break it down in multiple segments. A lot of folks said that approach wouldn't work because it was too big, it was too encompassing. But at the end of the day, it was probably the easiest project we ever worked on in terms of getting funding, because agencies that we applied to funding for saw that scale and they actually liked it. And so it was probably easier, I think, than a lot of projects than breaking it down, which was really, really good for us, because it kind of told us that, you know what, if you really have the desire to do something large scale and do it, you know, you can sell that project. And I think it was one of the easier sells we ever had. And what was also neat about it is that the project ultimately, you know, we did things like planting Atlantic white cedars, which there were no Atlantic white cedars in this area to use. So we collected seed and harvested down in Chesapeake Bay area, and then they were brought back here to Western Mass, grown out of seed and propagated, and then brought back to our site. And now projects around here use the seed that we produce because it's a local genome. Projects like Kidmarsh never would have happened without Eel River first setting that sort of stage. So the project was great in and of itself, but it was terrific for what it actually, you know, followed with other projects that were built upon what we did there. So walking through that site today is really cool. Very neat project, and nice to see it growing up after, geez, I don't know what it's been, 10, 11, 12 years now. So
David, do you see a lot of people when you go out there?
we do, yeah, it's a pretty popular walk. All different wetland types in there, and just a beautiful hike. So we do see a lot of people using that property, which is nice.
When I was just away for 2 weeks, one of the things that I wanted to do was to go to some of these conservation projects and see how they did their walking trails, see how they put out the maps of how it was accomplished. I think what this project did for Plymouth is it really put us on the map when it came to this large scale conservation restoration project like you're talking about. But it also, at least in my experience, was the first time we partnered with every agency you can imagine. I mean, do you remember like the board, how many different agencies were there? And now that we have this good relationship with them, they always seem willing to come to the table when we have something else that we want to do, because you proved that it could be done. Yeah. And as I went around when I was away looking at some of these different projects, those seem to be the most successful. The ones where you bring in so many of the different agencies. And also someday when I'm a professor and I drag you into my classroom, this will be the project I actually have you teach the students about, because it encompassed everything that you would learn about, but you haven't actually, you know, as you're a practitioner and you're actually doing it out in the field, it's so incredibly different.
Yeah, the project partners we had on that really did set the stage for having some really long-term partnerships. Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and NOAA, and the Commonwealth, and yeah, we've been able to do, you know, quite a few multiple projects after that because of that relationship, which again speaks to the how great that project was, but everything else that it allowed us to do afterwards. So yeah, that's a pretty memorable one for sure.
And talk to me about harbor dredging, because how many times did we meet? And there were so many financial challenges and permitting challenges and procurement issues along the way that I think we're both still shocked how, I know we didn't get as much done as you originally wanted to. I mean, you would have gone much wider than we were able to, but what an accomplishment for the town. Yeah,
I always think back the first meeting I ever had on harbor dredging was at the late Senator Kennedy's office down the Cape. So that tells you how long it actually took. So obviously a lot of hard work with the state and federal delegation, trying repeatedly to get the congressional appropriation to do that funding for Army Corps, and then build upon that with what we did with the town funding and the state funding. As you said, we didn't get everything accomplished that we would have liked to because some of the permitting issues drove up the cost significantly. Hopefully this fall we'll go in and finish that last area that we'd like to do, which is in and around Town Wharf, which would be really great for Captain John boats and party boats and you know, all the tenders in that area. So if we can get that done, which we're just waiting for the Commonwealth to see if we can get that grant funding, that would be quite an accomplishment. Dredging was certainly one of the more challenging projects that we've ever done. Not so much from the, you know, the design and the permitting especially, but just trying to get that level of money appropriated on behalf of the town of Plymouth. And I mean, you know, it took so many different people, so many years constantly trying to get that funding approved. But so yeah, David, people say we can't do a project and they actually get it done. done.
Right, right. So David, the picture that they're showing right now on the screen is the one that you provided with all that, as a layman, all that muck that just sits there. How much did you actually, not you, but how much was actually pulled out of there?
Yeah, so we were aiming for about 40,000 yards in our project. Army Corps was in the hundreds of thousands of yards. Army Corps material was able to go offshore for disposal. Ours actually got all barged all the way to New Jersey. So, multiple different projects, multiple different components about where it could go once it was dredged. And I think one of the interesting things about dredging too is it's one of those projects that, while all that work's going on, you don't really see anything other than the equipment, right? It's not like you see a building go up or a park rebuilt. It's like all underwater. So unless you're out there in your boat, you can see the depths. But those who use the harbor, both recreationally, but also for all the tourism associated with it, and hopefully, with the pandemic ending, small cruise ships and those kinds of things, they'll all have the benefits. So hopefully, we'll see a lot of economic gain from those improvements that we were able to make.
Now, dredging is something that should get done. I don't know, is it fair to say every decade or every 2 decades?
Yeah, it's probably something that probably shouldn't go more than, 20 to 25 years in certain locations. Yeah, obviously it hadn't been done in some areas here that we were dredging in 70 years, certainly over 50 in most of the spots. So yeah, it really needed to be done. Maintenance dredging is something that we'll have to aim for going forward in the future. So we don't get to quite that same point that we did when we needed to do it.
Is maintenance dredging something that we would do on the local level, or is that something that we would bring a separate contractor in with equipment and something that we would do like every couple of years?
You'd probably want to do it depending upon the area and how quickly it fills in every 10 to 20 years, depending upon the location. The nice thing is the Commonwealth does have the saltwater dredging program now, which, requires the community to provide the one-to-one match, but, that's a pretty good deal. So rather than dredging, say 200,000 every, 40 or 50 years, maybe you can do 50,000 or 75 and maintain that depth that you're looking to maintain when you do it every 10 to 15 or 20 years. So lot less expensive to do it that way for sure.
Well, I'll tell you this, Plymouth Town Meeting members have been so supportive when it comes to a match. If they put up some of the money, there is nothing they like better than if we can guarantee or tell them, we won't do this project unless we get matching funds from the state or the federal government. David, I can't think of a time when town meeting said no to that. If you can come through with the grant money for that matching amount, they're happy to say, go ahead and get that project done.
I think I learned very early on when I started with the town that, when in Plymouth's no different than any other community in regards to this, it's very difficult to go to, town meeting and say we want, 4 million for dam removal or 10 million for dredging. But to your point, if you can say to them, we can provide a one-to-one match. In some cases, I think of the Foothills project immediately jumped to mind, the one we just are wrapping up. That was about a $1.4 million project, and the town put in 40,000. So if we can do things like that, yeah, you're right. Town meeting's been so incredibly supportive of the projects we've done, and hopefully, not only have we, achieved a good financial balance for the town and offset the cost a lot, but we've hopefully done some projects that people really like, appreciate, and have improved the quality of life for people here. So I hope that's the case because they have been very supportive.
It is the case. Talk to me about the Holmes Dam removal.
Yeah, Holmes was, that's a project that even though we were doing other projects up and down Town Brook, we were always sort of looking at that one for multiple reasons. One, it was the only high hazard dam the town actually owned. So issues of concern and public safety and liability and inspections and all of that. But also knowing that we had done some pit tag study of fish, and we knew that location was pretty rough for river herring passage. So it was just this unique combination of contaminated sediment behind the dam, public safety issues with the dam, ecological impacts to the fish and the quality of the water in that area. So even though we were doing those other projects, we were always looking to hopefully get to that one someday. And then, as is often the case, a lot of those projects sort of grow. And so, it was a dam removal and then the bridge replacement. And then when we had meetings with the public, they were asking about, can you fix up the park at the same time since the area is going to be disturbed. So it went to a river restoration, to a dam removal, to a bridge project, to a park project, and sort of encompassed all of those things, which makes for, really interesting projects. But it also, obviously, logistically, that was probably the most difficult project we ever did. Roadway closings, utilities, we had to put in temporary utilities to finish the bridge and make sure, in the wintertime when we were working, people still had, gas and water and, all this water services, and then put the bridge in and put permanent utilities and build a park. And so logistically, that was really challenging of a project. But from an ecological perspective, we know that we have about 95% fish passage through that site now. I think based on the number of kids we see out there, the park's pretty popular.
Mm-hmm.
As well for the skate park. So
Remember that first day when you opened up a section of it and you saw the bird fly down and grab the fish? Do you remember that? It was almost, I think you had a group of people there and you said it was almost like we staged it because it was
right.
perfect that it happened.
That was the osprey that swooped down, and yeah, I mean that's what river herring do, right? So they support a lot of other species, and when you can see that, even though they're taking the fish, it's good to see because that project's working. So yeah.
And there's a nice walkway all along there also.
There's a great walkway all the way from Brewster Gardens all the way up to off Billington, and we got some funding at Fall Town Meeting to hopefully do that sidewalk and footbridge all the way up, and eventually some point in time, hopefully be able to walk all the way from Brewster Gardens and Morton Park and back down, which would be a pretty neat walk all along Town Brook. So
how long will it be?
Town Brook's about 1.7 miles long, so a couple mile walk. Pretty neat though. You start out at Brewster Gardens near the water, and you go by sort of the developed part of the project and of Town Brook. But then by the time you're in Morton Park, you feel pretty secluded. So even though it's relatively short, pretty neat walk based on how many different things you can see and how it changes as you go upstream.
Yeah, that'll be a nice one to have. Nelson Park. So also one of my favorites, because I don't know why. I mean, I just love the splash pad. And I love that every time you go down there, the number of families that just go down there and spend the whole day, it's pretty incredible.
Right. I think Nelson was one for me where I learned a lot too, especially after having done Brewster Gardens, and that when we were talking about it, we were talking about the splash pad, and Plymouth didn't have a splash pad at that point. We were talking about that a lot. I can't tell you how many people said that was a dumb idea and no one would use it and what a waste of money. And now I look at it, and it was funny because we did that and people said it wouldn't get used. And then remember the first year we had all the parking issues and people would say, you didn't build enough parking. I was like, well, I thought it was going to be used, right? So it's just whole like, are you building a park? Are you building a parking lot? But yeah, in that one, I had a lot of fun with that. If you remember, my son was pretty little when we did that one, and he helped pick out spray patterns and what little kids would like. And so he looked at a lot of those things from a child perspective and said, Daddy, I think that'd be cool. And yeah, I think that project's been really neat. I mean, obviously, talking about projects that improve quality of life, I gotta imagine, just like Brewster Gardens has a lot of people who have weddings and prom photos and all that kind of memories of Brewster Gardens. A lot of families playing in Nelson, and that's a cool project. And a lot of people have a lot of good memories of going there for the day or the week there, and having fun there. So that was a fun project to work on for sure. And Mark Sylvia asked me if we could work on that and do some improvements there. And then I think at that point, like you said, I think at that point people said, oh well, Dave does parks, and then I guess I got roped into doing parks.
That's one of the things that, whenever you adopt something for the first time, you tend to, in the public sector, then own it after that.
Right.
So the beautiful Maritime Facility. And because of COVID, I cannot believe that I haven't been in the completed, finished building yet. So I am coming down there very soon, but tell me about it.
Yeah, I mean, one, aesthetically, it's beautiful, but from a very practical, functional standpoint, it's just so much better for the staff. The old Chad and I always talk about how the old shack has that iconic look to it. It's beautiful to look and paint, but it certainly wasn't beautiful to work in. No exaggeration. I remember being in Chad's office with him during some storms, and he would put a trash bag in the window to stop the snow from coming into his desk, and leaky windows, and no bathroom facilities. So, some very pragmatic improvements. But
I remember trying to go up those ladder stairs with a suit on. Certainly not the easiest thing I've ever done.
yeah, can't imagine doing that in heels for sure. So, um, but also having the office space, but the bathroom facilities and the transient facilities is going to be a really good thing to have for the economy and people visiting Plymouth by boat. We never had those facilities, and now we do. And again, I think that's going to be really welcome, especially as
And
a pandemic.
we should have those facilities, especially with all the work that we're doing in the harbor. And I want to assure everybody right now that's watching the show, the rumor that is out there that the old harbor master shack is coming down is absolutely not true. I think everybody loves that. You called it iconic building, and I agree. But David, we are going to be able to shore it up more, right? And use it for storage. And we have some other ideas that we're throwing around.
Yeah, I mean, it does need some work, no doubt about that, if we want to keep it long term, and I think everyone does. It's going to need some shoring up. And can we use it for storage? Could we use it seasonally? Could we use it for, potentially some ice or something like that, or some other benefit? Absolutely. It's going to take a little bit of work to put into it. But I do think everyone thinks it's worth saving, if no other. It's sort of like this, this visual touchstone that people are used to. It's like when the Mayflower left, you didn't see it anymore. You realize how much you appreciate it being there. And I think the same would be true of that shack.
Well, that's one of the things that I think that we can partner with the schools on. I've really always wanted to be part of working with Plymouth South High School and the students there in their program, and what better project for them to work on than the Harbor Master's Shack right there. I don't know if it will happen because they always have so many projects in front of them, but certainly something we're going to look at.
Yep.
The T-Wharf, another fantastic accomplishment, but that one was almost brutal as we were going through that. That was just such a huge change for the fishermen and for everybody down there. That was a politically tough one.
Yeah, I think that, again, that's one of those projects that, when we started working on it, we've done some repairs in that area very early on in my career. And when we talked about replacing the structure, you go back and you look at previous inspections and reports, and we have documents that, dated back to the late 60s saying, that structure needs to be replaced. And here we were, decades later, and it was still there. And so that was another one I think, people would always say it needs to get replaced, but it would never happen. And so that's another great reason to get those kind of projects done. The state, again, was terrific to us and provided half the funding. So, yeah, that was a fun project. Obviously, some challenges there, taking the old one out and driving piles and building a boardwalk so close to woods. And but I think the boardwalk is a real hit. Behind it, aside from people who use the pier itself for commercial fishing, the boardwalk has been really popular as well. So definitely worth it. It was great to see it. We had an amazing contractor out there, which made everything so much easier and so much more enjoyable when we were actually constructing that project. So that was a fun one for sure. And after all those years of seeing that structure sort of fall apart, and first we couldn't have the fuel on it, then we couldn't have people walk on it, couldn't have vehicles on it. So then finally being able to get a structure that people can use and not have to think about it, it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things about the T-Wharf, are we even still calling it that? Are we still calling it the T-Wharf?
Yeah, we still do, even though it looks more like a hockey stick than a T, but yeah.
We'll stick with the T-Wharf. I love the people that you'll see go down there. I have a small group of, call them the old timers, but in a very loving way. I have a group of old timers that I'll go see in different parts of town as they have their coffee in the morning. And boy, between that and watching people put in their boat at the state boat ramp, they can give me a blow by blow of what's happening in that whole area. It's their favorite place, one of their favorite places to go.
I think what's funny about that too, that you mentioned it, is when you do these projects, you get these sort of unexpected uses of them. And I remember the first 4th of July after the project was complete, so many people came out there and started putting their lawn chairs on it to watch the fireworks. And I was thinking, never thought about that, but it's actually a great spot, right? And you see that every year ever since, like people use it to sit on and watch the fireworks, and it's a phenomenal spot.
It is.
And it's perfectly angled to the fireworks. So those kind of things that are kind of funny when you do a project that they get those kind of benefits.
Well, we are almost out of time, and I just want to show a couple more pictures that I found. This first one that's showing right now is you and I and Ken Tavares, chairman at the time, in one of the fisherman shacks across from Long Beach that so many people wanted us to save, and you can tell by the picture, it is almost impossible to do. The second one is those, do you remember sending me the picture of the river otters?
Yeah.
And where did you release those?
So those were released at Eel River, which is really neat. We worked a lot with Cape Wildlife for wildlife issues and wildlife that needs rehab. They were looking for a home for those two otters that they had rehabbed, and they reached out to us and said, you know, there's this Eel River site that's really awesome habitat. And for us, it was wonderful that we were going to get these otters, you know, put into the site. But to think that, you know, 10 years ago that was a cranberry bog, and we restored it to wetlands, and now folks were looking at it and saying, you know, that's like ideal habitat. Mm-hmm. That's, you know, so nice to hear, and really sort of confirms everything we did out there to try to restore habitat. So that was just a great day, one, to have otters there, and two, to know that we had created some really good habitat that others had recognized as well. Yeah. And
then finally, the last picture that we're showing is before we started the Maritime Facility. It's you and I and Chad Hunter and some of the staff from your Department of Marine and Environmental Affairs. We went to look at a model of similar, a style like what we're going to build. And it was a great day because I think we knew then we were going to be able to make this happen in Plymouth. Right, we were really close, and we were seeing Marshfield have their grand opening there, and we tweaked some of the things from them as well, because you always learn from other projects, and that's why it's important to see other projects, to see what you like and what you don't like and what you think you could improve upon. But yeah, that was a great day, because I think at that point we all realized, like, after a lot of work, that project was actually going to happen. Right. Well, thank you for being with me. You're very welcome, David. We'll do it again. And for everybody watching Truth Be Told, I was glad to have you with us today, and we'll see you next week.